Chancellor, deans, parents, families and friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, and most of all, fellow graduates. I'm thrilled to be able to offer great congratulations to all of the graduates today, to celebrate your great efforts over a number of years in what is surely one of the most exciting days of your lives. May your hard work and knowledge gained, along with the imprimatur of this great institution, lead you onward and upward. And on behalf of the graduates, because I can speak on behalf of the graduates, I'd like to thank all of those who have helped us, our parents and families, our friends, our mentors and instructors, those who made coffee. Thank you. Even those standing behind me who may have challenged us at times, so thank you very much. Look, I am truly thrilled today. It's taken me about 23 years to get here, hopefully longer than any of you, although there may be one or two who are not that far behind. This tardiness may well be a symptom of my inefficient scholarship, but still I'm ecstatic. Because, why am I ecstatic? Because I believe in this great university, and I'm proud at last to be a graduate of it. And most of all, because I believe in agriculture. For me, agriculture is a way of life, and agriculture is essential to humanity. I come from a farming background. It now seems somewhat distant in time and space, but it's very deep in the soul. My compatriot Robert Burns, more than 2 centuries ago, reflecting on his own agricultural work, upon turning up a mouse's nest with the plough, wrote, "I'm truly sorry man's dominion has broken nature's social union and justifies that ill opinion which makes thee startle at me, thy poor earth-born companion and fellow mortal." And in that poem, he presaged the contemporary emphasis of agriculture, increased production with reduced environmental consequences. Well, that was a little bit of Scotland, but I really would like to concentrate on Australia, although I will get back to Scotland a little bit. When I think of Australian agriculture, I think of constancy and of continual innovation. We could talk about droughts and floods, but I think of constancy and innovation. Around the turn of the last century, around 1900, there were 3 famous bush balladeers who wrote in the Bulletin. I think only 2 of them are really well known today, namely Banjo Patterson and Henry Lawson. But the third was a Scot by the name of Will H. Ogilvie, who jackarooed up on the New South Wales-Queensland border between Burke and Cunnamulla for a decade in the 1890s. He then returned to Scotland and wrote ballads of the Scottish border until the 1960s. His great mate and fellow balladist and stockman up there on the Darling was Harry Morant, of whom he wrote, "Breaker Morant was the name he earned, for no bucking horse could throw this Englishman who had lived and learned as much as the Bushmen know." In Scotland around 1910, Ogilvie wrote an epistolary poem back to Australia lamenting the border country of northwestern New South Wales. "Do the shearers still go riding up the Warrego to work, where the Thurlgoona woolshed flashes silver in the sun? Are the bullock teams still bending through the Coolabahs to Burke? Is there racing at Ingonia? Is Billeley still a run? Do the Diamantina cattle still come down by Burrengun? Is the black soil just as sticky? Is the mulga just as dense? Are the boys still rounding cattle on the red Mulkitty plains? Are there still some brumbies running on the Maranoa fence? Still some horsemen always ready with more gallantry than brains to race them through the thickest scrub with loose and flapping reins? Well, the answer then in 1910 and now a century later is essentially yes, yes, and yes. There's definitely racing at Ingonia. I've seen that wool shed. They're still running cattle, but they're probably going by truck, and the black soil is just as sticky, perhaps a little stickier. Maybe a bit of loss of carbon there. So Australian agriculture, even in fragile environments such as the Warrego, is constant but adaptable. Australian agriculture in this sense is sustainable. And why is Australian agriculture so successful? Part of the reason is attitude towards government, something I realised only very recently after a quick trip around the world late last year. In Europe, farmers put up with, work with governments, but they expect to be subsidised. In the US, farmers detest the government, but they expect to be subsidised. In Australia, farmers don't really mind the government, but don't really expect anything from it at all. And that's the difference. This actually leads to continuous innovation with a 2.5% productivity increase per annum. For a long time, Australia's most efficient industry, backed by a peerless research record in science and technology. Food is now cheap, from more than 20% of disposable income in the 1950s to less than 10% today. Some would say too cheap. Agricultural production clearly has its impact on our catchments, and we as a society expect our environment to be maintained in good condition. In the language of today, we expect the farmers to maintain ecosystem services on our behalf and at the same time to produce cheap and more food for us and the world. We need government on our behalf to put in place mechanisms to compensate landholders for the provision and maintenance of such ecosystem services. Some would say that this could be achieved at a stroke by putting a GST on fresh food and hypothecating that source of tax to provide those ecosystem services. I guess none of our political parties currently have the intestinal fortitude for that. We must continue to innovate to solve the world's food security crisis and to do it sustainably. We are truly skilled at agriculture in Australia, and we must take our ideas to the world. We should continue to develop our Australian agriculture and regional Australia, and we should also build the high-speed train lines and develop a couple of new large cities to take the pressure off Melbourne and Sydney. We need to develop a country much less tyrannised by distance. And if we must have coal seam gas, and many would ask, why not leave it subterraneously until we actually really need it? We need to figure out how co-located mining and agriculture can be better synergised. The only barrier to any of this is human capacity and will. And the universities have their part to play. Universities are here to serve and lead the community sustainably. Universities need funding models that ensure that we don't lose great swathes of our national capital of skill, knowledge and wisdom in agriculture. But it must be more than that. Our universities need to encourage our youth who don't yet realise the import of agriculture, and we need to be able to generate the knowledge and wisdom for tomorrow's much increased food production. Without agriculture, there would have been no cities, no trade, no civilization as we know it. Those of us who live in the cities might think it, but there really is no post-agricultural society. We live here by virtue of all of those who work on the land and produce our food and fibre. We still need to grow food and even more and more of it with less resources of soil, water, and non-renewable energy per unit of production. And we need to produce it with more precision. And there, my fellow graduates, lies your future, the noble challenge. Please take it up. It will reward you, and it will benefit humanity. In the end, and I think you'll be glad to know I'm almost at the end, I'm truly optimistic about agriculture, about Australia, and most importantly, about you. Have a little bit of poetry in your lives. Create, be imaginative, pass on your skills and knowledge to others here and across the world. In this way, we shall prevail. Thank you, and may the 4th be with you. Thanks.